Hello, my name is Jocelyn, and today I'll be responding to Ms. Yosef's claim that carbohydrate consumption positively affects humans' health. Honestly, it's hard to refute that carbohydrates are good for your health, but her arguments supporting her claim were mainly focused on the benefits of high carbohydrate diets, citing pretty much textbook information, mainly that her points were body's primary source of energy are carbohydrates, that the most beneficial form of carbohydrates is the complex form, and that low carbohydrate dieting, or more likely to be known as low carb diets, are bad for you. While even I agree with most of these statements, I believe that they were presented in a misleading way that could be used as excusatory for bad dieting, of course, if somebody wanted to. My first example of that would be that the body's primary source of energies are carbohydrates, her first claim. The advocate also mentions that the USDA's recommendations are 55 to 65% of our daily calories should be carbohydrates. Pretty much implying that if one's meals are mostly or even almost halfway carbs, that it's healthy or pretty much normal. But she doesn't warn that this can be used as company information for someone who's trying to balance their daily diets, because carbohydrates are definitely not the only source of energy for the body. In fact, most of us actually have high carbohydrate diets already, but not of the heart healthy kind. Because according to a U.S. national survey data that was conducted by a company that's actually called NHANES, in 2013 through 2014, they found that Americans consume about 6.6 ounces equivalents per day of grains, but only 0.9 ounces of those are actually whole grains or complex grains. On average, the other 5.7 ounces equivalents per day are refined. So they don't have as much nutrients as the complex carbohydrates, of course. They also found in the same study that there hasn't been a change in the average amounts of fruits, such as also vegetables, dairy, red meat, poultry, or even seafood since 2003. We're still eating about the same amount, but we are eating more refined grains. And of course, all these foods have their own health benefits that greatly affect our energy levels. Specifically with fruit, a 2013 study by the Center of Disease Control found that a whopping 80% of adults don't actually reach their daily recommended amount of fruits per day, or even half. And that kind of goes into the claimant's second part. The second support that the most beneficial forms of carbohydrates are complex, specifically that they have more nutrients and fibers to help regulate bowel movements. I've already shown how the average person fails to eat a diet comprised of mostly complex carbohydrates each day, so I don't have to restate that. But I also do find it worth mentioning that fruits and vegetables are also a great source of fiber, and we also, again, aren't eating most of those, especially when they're eaten with the skin still intact, as creepy as that sounds. But Los Angeles registered dietitian Amy Long Carrera also stated that just a half a cup of serving of most fruits and vegetables actually contain up to 3 grams of fiber, which is a lot more than we get on the daily. I also don't have to point out with any data that our most popular method for passing bowel movements would be prune juice, which is also another fruit. So it's definitely not the only way to get carbohydrates, especially because if you also do have high carbohydrate diets, they found that you tend to get blockages in your colon because you have to process all of that. So that could be a downside. But lastly, the claimant's final support was that the low carb diets aren't healthy. Generally, it's actually technically how one follows the low carb diet which dictates whether it's healthy or not. Because in most cases, when the average person attempts to follow a low carb diet, they actually end up under eating, even sometimes severely in all areas, just as a side effect. So they don't go over their allotted amount of whichever specific nutrient that they're setting. And as a side effect, a lot of people actually harm their bodies through, prolonged malnourishment or from the binge eating following the break in their diets. But when healthily followed, the somewhat dated data from the 1996 study by the American Society for Clinical Nutrition actually found that there's a similar weight loss with low or high carbohydrate diets, determining that weight loss is actually in response to low energy diets over a short time period. meaning that after a year follow-up, a randomized low-carb weight loss trial performed by the Philadelphia Veterans Affairs Medical Center, they actually found with the data that the people who lost weight on low-carb diets, they actually had a faster metabolism time in the long run, a whole year later, than those who just perform with just exercise. So there's definitely benefits, especially also if you have diabetes. It really helps reduce your insulin levels to not eat as much carbohydrates. And so with that, I conclude that carbohydrates are beneficial to one's health, but also treating that it must be with moderation and conjunction with other healthy foods.
All right, I appreciate that the topic was a little complicated because you seem to feel like they're actually presenting something on which there isn't a lot of dispute. And I do think that you find a place where there is a little bit of dispute on the argument, and that is that the conclusions might be misleading if people misunderstand the nature of the carbohydrates that they're dealing with. So you try to turn some aspects of it into an argument and create some grounds for division between the two sides. I appreciated that, and I thought you did a pretty good job on that. The information on the first point mostly indicates that people are failing to get the adequate amount of carbohydrates that they need from the type of carbohydrates that are most useful to them. Although you do argue that we get plenty of carbohydrates, we get them from the wrong sources. And so the dispute that exists here isn't that people aren't getting enough carbohydrates. The advocates suggested that carbs aren't bad, and you're suggesting that certain carbs are better and they're more healthy for you. I did think that you suggested that the complex carbohydrates, rather than the refined ones, have greater nutritional value, but I didn't see any evidence on that. You asserted it, but I didn't really hear any of the information on that. And then we get into kind of a fiber argument concerning the fruits and vegetables that people are eating or not eating, that we haven't changed that much on that. And then we're back to most people don't get the amount of fruits and vegetables that they're expected to have in their diet anyway. How that relates to the carbohydrates was a little bit unclear, so it feels like it's a piece of information that's not worthless, but I'm not sure how it applies to the controversy that you're trying to build up here. On the second part, this is where like I said, the fiber issue becomes a thing, and we're talking about bowel movements here, and that's always a fun discussion to have. The thing that I thought at the end, you suggested that high carb diets sometimes do create blockages, and that seems to be a point that directly contradicts the position that the advocate's talking about. But again, I didn't hear the evidence on that, and you provided evidence on other things, so I'm not sure why you didn't give me a citation on this, unless it's just an assumption and you don't really have any evidence. So you want to be more consistent on that. On the last point, we get into some discussion about whether or not low-carb diets are dangerous, and I think that you do have a good general argument that says that they are beneficial for some people. I think you need to develop that a little bit more and show that the notion that people on low-carb diets are somehow endangered is probably not accurate. There's a discussion about malnutrition, and that seems to be not because people are on low-carb diets, but because they are starving themselves of other foods and nutrition that they need as well to go along with that. That's a good counterclaim suggesting an alternate causality, but it's all asserted on this point, and I think you need some evidence on that. So you've got information in your speech, but the information that's most useful to develop a counterclaim or the controversy is the stuff that's least likely to get cited here. Okay, thank you.